Ladies and gents, welcome to another episode of Masters of Marketing. In this episode, I have with me the one and only Chris Du. We've talked about personal branding, corporate branding, social media, the power of grids. Is it worth using it? How to reach organic audience by cutting through the noise. Chris Du is a very cool guy with a lot of experience. He has almost 1 million followers on his Instagram. He creates amazing content. I highly advise you to follow him because he has a cool edge. He shares a lot of valuable content. He runs a lot of workshops. He helps a lot of people. Super cool guy and love the session. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Tune in and enjoy. Chris, welcome to Masters of Marketing.
Thanks for having me, Bassam.
Yeah, man. Good to have you. I was just actually surprised. I was looking at your Instagram and I saw that you have almost 1 million followers. I didn't know.
I saw your post. Yeah.
I thought, first of all, I was like, I thought you have like close to 100,000. Oh, I thought it was like 97,000 or so. And I was just actually walking down now on the downstairs. And I was like, man, this guy has almost 1 million followers. So what's the story? How did you get there?
I got there almost by accident, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm 51 years old. I came late to the social media game. I didn't understand how to use any social platforms. And it's not until I start looking into it that I actually make any real progress. Like most people, I think when we create stuff on social, we're like, what do I post? It's the dilemma that everybody has. Oh, I'll show a picture of what I'm eating. Here's a cool place I'm at, and here's like a scenic, idyllic thing that I'm doing. Aren't I so cool?
Yeah.
And yes, you will grow up following in the very beginning, and it's kind of aspirational, it's lifestyle, and mostly friends and friends of friends will follow you, but not at any great scale. So you can get to 500 to 1,000 followers, and then you're like, I can't grow anymore. What's wrong? So
Mm.
I learned how to create content on Instagram, mostly because of by accident. I had a guest on my show. His name is Michael Janda, and when I interview somebody, I have to like look into their profile, and all of a sudden I see like Michael's account is growing really fast. And I think at this point I had about 30,000 followers, and he had like 5 or 10. But when I checked his account, it's like 15, 20. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's going to catch up to me. What's he doing that I'm not doing? And I realized he did something. He took portions of his book and he broke it down into Instagram carousels. At that time, a fairly new feature where he could post 10 slides at a time.
Mm.
And I was like, this is genius because he's not writing new content and he's explaining concepts from his book, which further cements his authority, but also builds interest in people buying the book. So I was thinking this is pretty genius. When he gets on the show, I'm like, Michael, I have to tell you, I'm really impressed. And I just love what you're doing. And they look like mini keynotes. And he goes, that's what they are. And I was like, I think I'm going to borrow the strategy. And he said, Chris, you should absolutely do this. And it was a light bulb moment because then I realized I have, at this point in my life, probably a couple hundred keynote decks. And each keynote deck has anywhere between 50 to 250 slides. That means I have almost an unlimited supply, a back catalog of content that I could use to teach. So I start sharing those things, and it doesn't take off right away because people don't want to read too many things on a slide. So I have to learn the vernacular of the way that you're supposed to post content natively on the platform. Once I figured that out, my count started to grow, and they say the rest is history.
So what was it then? Was it the carousel that made it, or yeah?
Well, there's a
Okay.
couple of things. It's like everything in life, any kind of thing that has a big payoff, it's timing, being at the right place, the right time, doing the right thing. So let's talk about it. It was the introduction of carousels, which was an underutilized tool that people weren't using. It was Instagram's intention to create more meaningful content, stickier interactions with people that drove the popularity of the carousel. And it was fairly new, such that by doing something of value, you're going to stand out. And although I didn't create that format, people do credit me as the person who started it. Like I'm like the godfather of this, even though I'm not. Clearly, I just told you
Mm.
Michael Jada did before me. But it
Yeah.
opened my eyes as to this is how you create content on Instagram. You deliver
Mm.
value. Excuse me. You teach people, and you do this one frame at a time. And if you get good at this, people are going to then get value and they're going to follow you and they're going to share it and they're going to save the post. And that's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
The next strategy was integrating hashtags, which my friend David Tallis helped me with. So, okay, now I've got the teaching part. I know how to speak the language. With a little tweaking from David, I started using the proper hashtags and combination of content and value, making it easy for the algorithm to find, discovering it for you page. That was really, really important for growth. And the last thing was featuring some key people as guest posts. So since I started growing my account, people wanted to get their message out in front of my audience. So they would just prepare a guest post and I would curate and select the ones I thought resonated. And a combination of me creating value, featuring guest posts that were really high value stuff, the account just took off to a point in which I was growing about 10,000 new followers a week.
Wow. Organically.
Organic, all organic.
You don't boost your posts?
I don't even know how.
Wow. Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
But your content stands out, man. It's different. I mean, you could see that you take time to produce a piece of content, like a lot of time between the design and the message, and like you feel like every post. How long does it take you to create one post? Like the nice posts, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it used to take a really long time. It would take me between 4 to 6 hours to write a carousel, to design it, to get it done. But at that level of production, I cannot keep up with the algorithm. Dropping a post that takes most of my working day, most of my brain power is not going to work. I'd given myself a challenge to produce a certain amount of content in 2 weeks. And I realized I needed to create 4 or 5 posts a day to be able to hit the numbers I wanted to hit. So in those 2 weeks, I learned how to create much faster. And I found out what the audience wants. And here's one tip for your audience, which is don't try to stuff your content with too much information. People don't want to consume it. So for example, if I want to say here are 5 things that you can do to grow your Instagram account, instead of putting 5 things in one carousel, I would just put one thing in a carousel. And I would just use 10 slides to explain the one concept. This allows the content to be more digestible, allows you to go a little bit deeper, and it also now gives you 5 pieces of content instead of one, reducing the pressure for you to constantly write new material. And I think that was the big insight for me. So take something that's dense and break it apart. I can't tell you how many times I scroll through Instagram. Sometimes my own team does this. They jam it with so much information that if you think about the person who's on their cell phone reading content or looking at
Yeah.
content, they want to consume things quickly. They want to have an enjoyable experience. If you hit them with a wall of text, you overload their system and their circuits fry. They're going to skip your post. They're just going to move on to the next thing.
That's true. Who is Chris and what do you do for a living?
I'm a complicated individual with many interests and a strange background. I'm a first generation immigrant from Vietnam. I am a late bloomer into graphic design, and I built my identity on design. And I worked in the TV and commercial broadcast world for 25 plus years, working with some of the biggest brands and bands in the world. In 2014, a former college classmate of mine, Jose Caballé, invited me to create content with him on YouTube, which was the last thing I wanted to do. I was reluctant because I'm an introvert. I don't feel like this is professional for me to be on YouTube, but he made me an offer I could not refuse. He said, sit there, don't say anything until you're comfortable, but we need to do this together. The decision to do so changed my life, changed my career, and it changed me. So now today, I no longer do client work. My freedom date is December of 2018. It's the last time we took on any new client work. And we've been able to grow a 4 million plus company by creating content, sharing openly with courses and resources. So that's how we sustain ourselves. We don't have clients. We have a lot of customers, not clients.
You said you create content that you sell or courses that you sell?
Mm-hmm. Most of the content we create, I would put it probably roughly between 75 to 80%. It's probably higher than that. Are things that we produce on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn, all free. None of it's gated. The full course load, the workshop, all of it's there for free. The way we're able to sustain ourselves, our company of 12 people, is that We sell courses and resources for people who become interested in what we do as a way to support us, but to get a more organized, cohesive document or tool set from us. And that's what generates revenue. Part of that is a coaching community that we run. We run 3 different coaching communities, depending on the level in which you're at in your business. That's how we
Okay.
make money. Mhm.
What type of courses are there?
There are some design courses like logo design, identity, doing brand strategy, lettering, typography. Those are the design courses, the more creative stuff. We have some business courses and workshops that we run, teach you about pricing, positioning, negotiations, how to build a proposal, templates for that, and resources to run your business.
Okay, got it. And the content that you create, obviously on Instagram, is yeah, you add value and you tell people what you do in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just like what I do in a way. Makes sense. And I see that you talk a lot about branding, personal branding, um, businesses, business growth, etc. So
Correct.
a question about personal branding. What are your top? I mean, I know it's a bit vague, but what are your top, if you think about it now, what are your top 3, let's say, personal branding tips? And I always talk about personal branding because I know the value of it. Now I do because I've
Yeah.
been investing in it. And but it's good to hear it from someone like you who's been investing as well in personal branding, who talks about it all the time. What are the top 3, let's say, top personal branding tips and how to start?
Okay. I think we have to do everything we can to make our story easy to understand, easy to remember, and easy for other people to tell the story for us. Because if I go and tell my story to you, and if you can't understand it, if it doesn't excite you, it doesn't resonate with you, you'll tell no one. And then it's a lot of work for me to continue to tell the story to each and every single person. And so what people do is they don't know who they are. They don't know what makes them them. They don't know the origin story. They don't know the moments in their life that are significant. So they can't tell those stories. And my business coach, Kieran McLaren, since passed away, would always say we need to develop a repeatable story, a story that our clients, our friends can then tell other people, like, hey, did you know Chris's mission is this? So we can package this up a number of different ways. If you study copywriting, you'll understand how to do this. You're trying to make it easy for people to digest the information and share it with others. So one exercise that we have people do is something called the 2-word brand. So what we want to do is we want to sum up the essence of who we are. It's an invitation to learn more, to provoke someone's curiosity. So my 2-word brand is I'm a loud introvert. Okay, and I'll explain how to get there and why I describe it this way. First, I'll tell you the story behind the loud introvert. I mentioned now I'm an introvert, and people have a hard time reconciling this when they see me teach, run workshops, or when they see me lecturing or creating all this content. They say to themselves, how can this person be an introvert? Because they are behaving very much like an extrovert. What they don't truly understand is that extroversion, introversion is about energies around people we know, or around strangers. I lose energy around people I don't know. I'm actually quite awkward socially. But what I've done is I've learned to master the game of creating content such that I can have the authority and the awareness that people who are much more extroverted, who love being in social circles, who love public speaking, that we can then kind of be on the same stage, literally and figuratively. And I usually go up on stage and I say, I just need to let everybody know I hate public speaking, but I love building relationships. I understand that being up here is the price I have to pay to have a conversation with you later. It's my introduction to you. I'm so socially awkward. My strategy is to make content so good, I don't have to develop social skills. Now, that's a really long story that's been condensed into loud introvert. What it does is it gets people to raise their eyebrow, either to say, that doesn't make sense, tell me more, or I'm the same way. You see what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
100%.
Okay. It doesn't tell the
Love
whole
it.
story. It's
Yeah.
just like the teaser trailer to the rest of your story. And that's what I'm doing. So, how does one create a 2-word brand? On the surface, it looks like you just find 2 words that are diametrically opposed, that are juxtaposed together, that then you can just tell somebody. So, somebody's like, well, I'm a quiet extrovert. And they'll do things like that. The problem with that is it doesn't have meaning for them. It might be clever, it might be memorable, but it's not true. So we have to find two words that are, first of all, true, memorable, and a way for people to kind of become interested in us. So here's what we do. So here's what we discovered. If I were to go on stage and tell you 3 positive things about me, you would start to question my sincerity, my humility, and maybe my hubris and all that stuff, right? So if I go on stage and I'm like, I'm an 8-figure entrepreneur, I've won multiple Emmys, and I've run one of the biggest, most successful motion design firms back when I was doing it in Los Angeles. All true, by the way. But now you're like, oh, this person's a blowhard. All they do is talk about themselves. But if I came on stage and I said 3 things that I don't like about myself that are not flattering, and then I tell you one truth, you're more likely to believe the truth. Okay, so here's how I would do it instead. I would say 3 things I'm bad at. I'm really awkward socially. I barely know what I'm doing with social media. And I really don't enjoy public speaking, but I do love making genuine connections with people. And I've gotten good at doing that. And I can help you do the same. See the difference between the 3 or the 2?
Yeah.
Okay. So why did I say that? Because we want to have as part of our core identity, our 2-word brand, something that's vulnerable about us, something that we don't normally tell other people. In EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, they have this thing called the 5% rule. They say that 90% of what you share with your friends and your family, with the public, are the generic stuff in between. But our high highs, the top 5%, or the bottom 5%, in terms of our low lows, are the things that we never share with anybody. In EO, they encourage you, share with us your 5% or your 10% if you put those 2 together. So here's the thing, is you'll notice this, when people share things on social, they'll talk about their success, but they won't talk about how they're making a gazillion dollars. They stop short of doing that because they're afraid they're going to be too boastful and people are going to turn on them. So for example, if I get an opportunity to be on Netflix on a new TV show or Amazon Prime, normal people don't say that because like it's going to create jealousy, it's going to create envy, and who does this person think they are? We're taught to be humble. It's a virtue for many cultures to be humble, okay? And on the opposite side, if we're having a tough year, I had to lay off people, or my wife and I split up or something like that, or my son and I are estranged, we tend not to talk about that too, because then people think, well, that's going to hurt my business. People are going to think that I'm not fully socially functional and all that kind of stuff. They're going to cast judgment on us. But the truth is, when you hold those 2 parts back, you keep people at an arm distance away from you. And when we read these posts, we can feel it. We can feel like, why are they holding back? I know there's a greater story here, but they're being too curated in what they say. So what we want to do in developing our 2-word brand is we start from what Carl Jung refers to as our shadow self, our self that we feel guilt and shame around, that makes us angry and frustrated about things that we just don't love. If we begin there and we start to figure out like our essence, then what we do is we add a transformer word so that we show people we've reclaimed our identity. So an introvert in an extroverted world, in a social media place of influencers and thought leadership, it's not an asset to have. It's like something I'm working through, but it reveals something a little bit vulnerable about myself. And then the transformer word is loud. So I'm a loud introvert. So it's like people then understand it. So when I run workshops on this, people come up with something like, I'm a people pleaser. That's not a great attribute to have. This is from a guy named Tom Ross. And so Tom, added his transform word, he calls himself a proud people pleaser. He's actually quite proud of this because his whole thing is he builds communities. He's highly attentive to the needs of others, and that's what makes him really, really successful. There are other versions to this, but basically you start from a place of vulnerability, that you have the strength and courage to expose that to the world, and you show people that you've worked past that, so you're reclaiming that for yourself.
And then?
Okay, so that would be tip number 1. Figure out your 2-word brand. You're keeping me accountable here. Yeah. Okay. So that's important part. So that becomes the beginning of how you're introducing yourself to the world. And if you come up with something that's good, that's true, that's meaningful to you, you'll start to get other people to introduce you this way. And this is what people do. So when I'm on stage, I usually use a combination of two words. I'll say, "Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Dell. I'm a loud introvert. I'm a recovering graphic designer. I'm a first generation immigrant, and I'm a serial entrepreneur." So I've hit them now with a bunch of two-word combinations that start to describe a little bit of my life so they have some sense of who I am. And then I tell them I'm on this mission to teach 1 billion people how to make a living doing what they love without losing their soul. So the next part of this is to figure out, beyond money, why do you exist? What is the thing that compels you, pulls you forward to get out of bed? What is that thing that you're trying to do such that when you're 75 or 85 years old, when most of your life is behind you, what is it that you want to leave behind? It could be small, it could be big, but then you want to be clear about this. So now people have a sense of who you are, they have a sense of your bigger purpose, so they know the motivation as to why you do what you do. I want to make enough money such that I can buy the art school that I went to. It's going to require a couple $100 million for me to do that. So now they know that part of it. The last part is you need to know your stories. And we break down our origin story into a couple different bits. One is your backstory. Quite literally, where were you born? Where do you live? What is your hierarchy in terms of your siblings? And a little bit about your parents. So it turns out where you're born and where you live say a lot to people. So if I'm from Los Angeles, where are you from?
Beirut, Lebanon.
Okay, so people have assumptions about both you and me, right? So when we say Los Angeles, you're going to think, okay, you're going to think things like traffic. You're going to think it's a little superficial. There's a lot of plastic surgery. You can say there's a lot of beautiful people. You can see some positive things like it's the entertainment capital of the world. And there's a lot of commerce happening there. It's where trends get started. There's like a lot of healthy lifestyle living. So just by understanding that and saying, I currently live in Los Angeles, but I was born in Saigon, people then start to have a story in their mind. And it's called cultural currency, right? So what I'm doing is when I'm saying I'm a refugee, people who identify as immigrants or refugees are going to start to say like, yeah, we see you. And if you're a person of color, or if you're Black or Native American, that brings some cultural currency that you can use if you wish. So you need to know and tell that part of the story. And then there's your transformation story, which is the part in which your whole life changes. You have that moment. I have had that moment. Maybe we've had this moment many times. We've had at least one. The transformation story says, this is how my life was. Something crazy happened. This is how my life is now. Kindra Hall, who wrote the book Stories That Stick, describes it this way. There's the normal, there's an explosion, and then there's the new normal. And quite literally for some people in the world, there's literally an explosion and everything changes. So for some people, their transformation story could be a car accident that then they become an orphan, or losing a parent and then something happens. They lost their foundational core. Something happened at that point. And going through that, the trauma, they emerge stronger. And when I teach this in narrative storytelling, I say the difference between heroes and villains in fiction is they both experience trauma and tragedy. It's how they process it moving forward. So if you look at a fictional character like Bruce Wayne, his parents were murdered outside the theater, and he then becomes the world's greatest detective. He gets training to have discipline over his body and his mind, and he becomes a superhero. A similar character in the universe of Batman would have trauma and tragedy, but become a villain. So they live in the pain, they blame other people, and they want to get revenge. They want to reshape the world so they feel the same pain. That's the story of the Joker. So two people experience similar things. How we respond to that trauma and that tragedy determines if we're going to be the hero or the villain in our own story. So you need to be able to tell those stories. Those are the three things.
So you identify that as part of personal branding, and then
Yes.
what do you do next? Like, how do you benefit from personal branding?
Well, that's where I may disagree with lots of people in this space. I think a lot of people think personal branding is how you get a job and how you get clients, how you not manufacture, but how you edit your profile and your story so that you draw the most number of clients to you. To me, personal branding is very different than corporate branding. Corporate branding has a responsibility to be able to create opportunities for the people that work for that organization so that culturally they're aligned. But as a real human being, I have things that I think are going to be polarizing to people, that people are going to love and people are going to hate. And when we repress those parts, we edit out that 5%, then basically we're not going to build a strong personal brand. You can no longer predict what I stand for. And a lot of the messages that come from me are going to be super generic. So my first and most important job is to be myself. It's a job I'm already most qualified for above everybody else. And what happens is through most societies, through most cultures, what we do is we start to suppress our true selves because we conform to what the majority thinks and how they behave. We cut our hair like them, we dress like them, we speak like them, we behave like them to be accepted because no one wants to be isolated. And in doing so, we hide ourselves. So my whole thing about personal branding is for you to do the journey inward before you go to do the journey outward. And I think you may agree with me on this. When people dispense advice, gurus, marketers, experts, authorities, masters of their craft, they're giving you advice and tips that have been said already 100 times by 100 different people today and yesterday and the day before that. Why do some people choose to listen to some thought leaders and not others? My theory is the information is packaged differently. I have 1 million followers on Instagram almost because the way that I speak, the way I design, the way I communicate. As you'll see, if you read some of the content, some of it has a little bit of an edge to it. And I'm not sitting here saying I'm for everybody. I'm not trying to be this warm embrace, this hug for everybody. I'm not. I'm here to distill the information I have in the style that I have. I do that through a couple of different ways. My word choice and phrasing, the choices I make in design, the aesthetic part of it, which people respond to, the packaging of the information is actually quite important, and through the voice, something called sonic branding. Okay, you may remember this, but there are jingles and notes like from the Netflix da-dum that you hear, and every time you hear that, you're like, that's Netflix. Or the Intel bum 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 bum. That's called sonic branding. This is the space I used to work in. We humans, you and I, we don't have sonic branding in that we're creating slogans and jingles and notes like that. But the power of our voice, the tonality, and the way that we speak transforms the words such that the frequency of that is going to attract and simultaneously repel other people. People who have a really high-pitched voice, who speak in a certain tone, drive people away. They also simultaneously attract people, but it's hard to hear someone that's really high-pitched. Like if I were to talk to you, oh, here's my tips, you can't take me seriously. This is why people who have a voice that's deeper in the lower register, who speak from the diaphragm, command authority, appear to be more trustworthy. And that's why they casted James Earl Jones to be the voice of Darth Vader. If you listen to the original actor's voice, he speaks with the German accent, I believe. You're like, this is not Darth Vader. But when you hear James Earl Jones say, Luke, I'm your father, you're like, oh my God, that's the voice of authority, right?
Yeah.
So we do it through that. So we're going to express ourselves and our content and our ideas through our unique voice, through the lens in which we see the world. And by doing so, people are going to be drawn to us and they're going to become naturally curious about what we do. So when I speak about branding or personal branding, I'm giving you my perspective through my lens with my voice in writing style and also the frequency in which I speak at. People are going to be naturally curious about, oh, I'm what, do you teach a course? Do you run a workshop? What's going on?
Mm. What about, so noted, and that's something for me as well to think about for my own content creation. I share only marketing related stuff. I share sometimes a bit of business because I'm involved in a few businesses, and I think I have some knowledge to share, and obviously I like to add value to these people that are either in business or thinking of solid business, etc. But mainly I talk about marketing. And a lot of people tell me, I say a lot because a lot really, people tell me like, why don't you share more content about like who you are, what you are interested in, about maybe your personal life. So you only talk about marketing, but what if you talk about like what do you do for fun? What are your activities? Maybe your family, maybe your trips, maybe your, you know, the music that you like, the festivals you go to, whatever that is, right? And I say, I don't know. I don't want to necessarily share my personal life. But I know, for example, when I post something a little bit personal, like we went for a Dubai run. So there were like, you know, hundreds of thousands of people walking on the main highway. And I posted one story and I got so much more, well, reach first,
Yep.
more, yeah, so more impressions, more likes,
Engagement.
more comments, whatever, yeah, more engagement.
Yeah.
So I wonder as well, like, is that, what do you think about that part?
Okay, I'm there with you on this, okay? And it's something that I'm working through myself. I think my value, my identity is a teacher. And I want to just teach and I want to talk about myself. And in doing so, I actually create this barrier, this emotional connection, which is what we're trying to all do. We're trying to build a connection with people. And so that we can say, like, I'm with this tribe or I'm against that tribe. And so when you just teach, it's great. You're giving lots of value, but people start to wonder, who's the person behind this? What is their perspective? And I don't think they want you to share like what you ate or this is a cute dog I saw today, because it's not really relevant. But if you can tell a personal story that has a marketing message, I think you get the overlap between the two spheres of interest. You're giving me value, but you're also saying this is something I'm working through, this is something I've learned, and you made the information much more tangible for people and relatable, because it's not now some theory, it's something you've lived. And I'll tell you how I do this personally. So my 2-word brand is loud introvert. So when I tell the story, I try to think, if that's the theme of my life, I want to tell the story in such a way that they get value from it, but they also understand the narrative, which is who I am. The example would be something like this. Instead of saying, hey, congratulations to us and our team for being a top 10 marketing podcast, which is very self-congratulatory, which not that many people are that interested in. But if I tell the story of there was a moment in time which I didn't want to create any kind of content, and then we started making videos on YouTube, and our audience and our community, which I don't understand at the time, are diverse from all over the world, and they don't have good internet connection. So quite many of them literally have to go to the library or some government facility and download the videos so that they can watch them at home. I don't know that because I'm living in a developed country. So it's like, I don't have problems like that. So they say downloading a YouTube video takes too long, takes up too much space. Can you just give us an audio version of this? I'm like, okay, whatever. But eventually I start doing this, and this sets me on a different journey, a different path. So I actually learn a lot from my community. When they ask for something, try not to resist, try to understand what the unmet needs are and meet the people where they're at. And in doing so, I'm able to amplify my message, but also serve a community that's often ignored. And so I start to tell that story. So that's a personal story that reinforces my reluctance to make more content because I'm a loud introvert. But it also taught me a valuable lesson that then the audience can learn too. And so I could summarize it further to make sure it's much more actionable and that there's a real learning there. So then I could say, like, look in your inbox, look in your DMs and your comments, and find the unmet need to an unserved community and do your best to meet them where they're at. You'll see that your reach and your engagement and your brand and your authority will grow. That would be the takeaway.
You took me places. I'm gonna listen to the recording again and hear exactly what you said. So I'll ask you again.
Yeah, I hear you. You're like, let me process that a little bit here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How to make Instagram content stand out and get more organic reach?
It's becoming harder and harder to get reach and stand out on Instagram. I think if we look at what the platform favors in terms of the types of content they want you to consume, if you play nice with the algorithm, you'll be rewarded for it. So they're always looking to increase stickiness and ease of consumption. If we look at the consumption habits of somebody who's on Instagram versus say on YouTube, we'll see that they're quite different. YouTube is really not a social media platform. It's a search engine tied to video content. So we would describe that as a lean forward versus a sit back. So YouTube starts with us picking something we want to watch or typing in a search for something that we're interested in. So our consumption habits going to be a little different. We know that YouTube videos tend to be longer, so we're going to have to dedicate time and space. Our frame of mind might be like, I want to take notes, I want to learn something. I might be in front of my computer because I'm stuck on how to edit a video or export a file or something like that. So we're very search driven. If we look at platforms that are true social platforms, there's a feed and the feed just keeps replenishing itself. It doesn't require any work from us. So it's more of a sit back experience. So when you create content that requires somebody to think too much, to work too hard, and you're disseminating too much information, they're not going to absorb that. They're not going to enjoy that. So currently, the two most popular ways to grow on Instagram is to create reels where nobody has to do any thinking. You just watch it. And the secret to creating a powerful reel is to make sure there's a payoff, but that you draw the audience along the way. And I'll tell you, and I'll break it down in this simple way. The most effective reels start with some perplexing, weird thing that's completely out of context. You often see sometimes they'll edit a 1.5 second clip of them doing something remarkable, like say a double backflip or something. You're like, what? And then what they'll do is they'll start the video then after that part in real time, in a linear way. They'll show somebody struggling to do one backflip, and they'll go through exercise, and then you see a little progress, and we're watching. They're like, okay, I kind of know where this is going. You know, they might do it on a chair, they might do it on a bed, and then eventually they're able to do one backflip and land. They're great, and then they do a double backflip, and that takes you right back to the beginning. So I used to work in the commercials and music video space, and there's an expression: storytelling is story delaying. We want to delay the outcome. We want to intentionally create friction for the audience so they want to know what happens next. I'll give you one more example, and then you're going to start to see reels and content very differently. There are people who make sandwiches, right? They'll show you this amazing sandwich and they'll break it apart. There's some ASMR stuff that's going. You hear the crunch of the bread. You'll see the cheese ooze between the two pieces of bread, and it looks delicious. That's how the video begins. The first step is they prepare the meat, they marinate it, and then they chop the vegetables and onions. They're going through this very labor-intensive process of making the sandwich you just saw. And we're intrigued by this. We keep getting pulled in, like, how does this become that sandwich? And we're living vicariously through them. So videos that show you how to turn a piece of bamboo into an umbrella, how to turn mud into like an underground dwelling, or how to take a raw piece of junk metal and turn it into a beautiful ring that someone wears, those videos work really, really well. We understand the structure now. Now you're saying, well, I'm not an artisan. I'm not a blacksmith. I'm not a woodworker. What the heck am I going to do? So if you follow the exact same formula, you show somebody the result. So it could be a really effective marketing campaign with like 700,000 likes. You show a little preview of it. And then you start to show the process of how you develop that campaign. So they're learning, but it's more entertaining as they learn. So you might start to say like, okay, what am I going to do? Okay, and then you write like stupid ideas and you just see the dumb ideas and then you erase them and then you do this and then there's an iteration and then you test that. Then you find the right image and then you Photoshop it together and then that's what gets released. And then the views go up. And you could use that same formula over and over again. And in fact, the more you do the same kinds of things, your audience will grow much faster because when they see one piece of content, they'll go to your page, your profile, and they'll look, are there more things just like this? Because I really enjoyed this. And if there are, they're going to follow you. And that's how you would grow. The other way that you do this is through carousel content. You use similar formulas. You have a promise of what you're going to learn on the first slide. You reiterate the promise, or you add nuance or detail or objections or something on the second slide, and you start to build it up like it's going to get to a certain point. In slides 8 or 9, you tell them the important thing you need to tell them. And on slide 10, you summarize it and then you ask a question. By asking your audience a question in the 10th slide, they're more prone to comment. And commenting is a piece of interaction. It's one point of interaction. It tells the algorithm, maybe this is an important piece of content. The dwell time on the carousel goes up because they're sliding through, and then they're taking time to comment. They're taking time to read the other people's comments. And then that piece of content will be seen by more people. So that's the general principle of it.
I'm gonna watch again the video.
Okay.
All right. I just noticed that we're not recording, man. No,
You're
I'm
not
just kidding.
recording?
I got you.
Yeah,
I
I see
got
the
you.
recording
I
button.
got you.
No, because you already said at the beginning, you can't fool me.
I did. I did for a second.
No, I see it all the time.
All right, good stuff, man. Is Instagram page layout or the grid of the page important?
Not really. I don't think it's that important. I think there used to be this trend where people would make a big collage and you could see the grid, or it creates interesting patterns. And at the end of the day, your entire content strategy is dependent on showing your content to new people, right? Because if the same people keep seeing it, you won't grow at all. In fact, your audience will grow tired. There will be something like content fatigue, and they'll eventually unfollow you. It's like, oh, it's more of the same. That's okay. So a simple rule, if you can adhere to this, is just think in threes a little bit. So if you have a dark post, post a white post and a dark post, just because it helps with contrast and people can spot it easier. Or you do 3 dark posts, you can do 3 light posts, and you can alternate. But just think in terms of threes, and visually that's a little bit more easy to look at, and it's just breaks up this wall of imagery or text. But I've seen people who do all white posts and are like, okay, it's just a blanket of whiteness, or all dark posts, all black. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, if your post is good, people will check it out. And if they look at that post and they see other posts just like it that are good, they'll follow you.
Okay. Makes sense. What are your top corporate branding tips?
A corporate brand is quite different than doing a personal brand, because it's the origin story of the founder, it's the culture of the collective, and it's typically filtered through marketing departments, legal, PR, all that kind of stuff, strategy. And so it doesn't have the same personality and voice of a personal brand. When I write for myself, I don't have to check in with anybody. I don't have to say, like, does this align with anybody else? Because my only job is for it to ring true to me. So what happens is most corporate brands become really watered down generic concepts and messages. They always play it safe. So what corporate brands need to do is they have to develop some kind of personality that they can live with for some time. So the example would be Wendy's. Wendy's has done a really good job. Here in America, we have a lot of fast food restaurants that are competing for your money. A lot of burger places like McDonald's, Burger King, Arby's, and Wendy's, and others. Carl's Jr., Jack in the Box. And so for Wendy's to stand out, which is a distant in terms of the ranking of sales in stores, they decided to have Wendy, the character, which inspired Dave, I believe, to create his restaurant in the first place. I think it was his daughter Wendy, who was a redhead, and he designed or created the restaurant to bring her to his place. And so Wendy is now an icon, a mascot. And then a couple of years ago, the advertising agency behind this said, let's give Wendy a voice. And Wendy is a little snappy. She's a little bit like smart alecky, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so McDonald's would do something kind of innocently and saying, Wendy's, why is your burger patty square? Right? Now, normal corporate brand, we're like, well, just because that's how we design it, blah, blah, blah. They cook fast or whatever. But in this new age, when there's a personality behind it, they write back and they do a clap back. They say, because McDonald's, we don't cut corners. And it's like, ouch. Right? And they started getting really spicy on Twitter, and then they became relevant again. Right? So instead of being a forgotten, distant fourth or fifth ranked brand, they at least now build a community of people who are really loyal to them. And so what happens is the same principles are in application here. You have to tell me something about you. You have to have some kind of personality so I can decide I'm a Wendy's person or I'm a Burger King person. I'm an Apple person or I'm a Microsoft person or Nokia or whatever it is that you want. Because we're and Marty Neumeyer writes about this. We're in an age where we move away from buying products to an age where we're joining tribes. All of us are searching for meaning and identity. Like, who am I? What makes me me? And it turns out in this modern age, when we buy something, we're saying something about ourselves and we're signaling to others what we believe in, right? So I see that are you wearing AirPods right now or are you wearing some other brand?
Yeah,
Yeah.
AirPods.
So for whatever reason, and you have a lot of choices, you know that. But when you see someone wearing the white earbuds, you're like, he's an Apple guy. And why are you an
Yeah.
Apple guy? Because they make clean, beautifully designed products that work within a closed ecosystem that are simple in design. They're not as high performance. The specs aren't as great. The battery isn't as long. The sound quality isn't as great, but they make my life easier. And they're usually sold at a premium. So when you walk around, and I know comedians do this a lot, they trash people with Android phones. They're like, yo, what's up with the blue text response? You know, you want to show up like that? So it's become class warfare now to say, like, I have an iPhone or I have a non-iPhone product, right?
Mm.
So that is true with coffee brands. It's true with all these kinds of things. So here again in America, we have Starbucks and we have something called Dunkin'. And so Dunkin' fights with Starbucks quite often. And they came up with this campaign that says, friends don't let friends drink Starbucks. Shots are fired. They're saying you're with us or you're against us, and they allow our audience, our community to choose. So it's the same reason why men drive specific cars, wear certain brand watches, because it says something about us, about our aesthetic, our taste, but it also signals to other people what we care about. So you're a Chevy guy, you're a Ford guy. Why is that? Because I come from a generation, 3 generations of Chevy drivers, or truck drivers, or the opposite is said to be true. We're signaling to people, these are my values, and they're completely emotional and irrational. Why we choose one brand of water over another brand of bottled water says a lot with like human psychology. Because if in a blind taste test, it'd be very difficult for you to pick the difference between the two.
Mm.
So let me summarize there a little bit. If you want to excel at developing a corporate brand, you need to give people a story so they can choose, because we tend to trust people and companies that believe what we believe. This is a Simon Sinek thing, right? We don't buy what you do, we buy why you do it. So if we take it back to the personal branding, I said you need to know your 2-word brand. You need to be clear about your mission, your reason for being. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. The balloon just launched there. Our reason for being, because then here's a classic example, a case study in branding. It's a company called Patagonia. Patagonia has been about sustainability, about being good stewards and good of the environment, and taking good care of their people. They often win awards for best places to work. And they came out with a campaign. It said something like, we're in business to protect our home planet. That's a big statement right there. Okay. Now, I don't know if you do outdoors things and if you like one brand versus the other. And there are probably 3 or 4 competing brands in this space. I'll name them. There's Patagonia, there's North Face, there's Columbia, and there's Arc'teryx. Different companies, different brands, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I think of being a responsible human,
Yeah.
I will buy Patagonia. It costs more than the others. The design is a little old fashioned. Their color palette is a little funky to me. The cuts are a little boxy. I would prefer the designs of the other companies, but I buy Patagonia because it resonates with who I see myself as and how I want to signal to other people. So some people will buy Patagonia because it signals status, like I can afford this, it's expensive, I know. Or I really care about the environment, I'm doing my part, are you? So that's a holier than thou approach. Or they could just identify with that kind of granola dirt bagging kind of outdoors thing. But the last thing they want to do is signal to people, I love the outdoors, I'm an adventurer. And we know this, that most people who buy an SUV, myself included, do not ever go off-roading. We know that most people who wear North Face or Patagonia never go for a hike, never climb ice mountains, never backpack up the Himalayan path or whatever it is. But we signal to people, I'm
Mm.
outdoorsy sometimes,
Yeah,
right?
makes sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Love it. How to create social media content with the smallest investment. And the second one is how to win new clients at the lowest cost for an agency, a marketing agency, or an agency.
This is a difficult question. So let's put some parameters around this. Let's say you're an under 5-person marketing agency. You're very nimble. You're working in a challenging, hyper competitive market. Okay, so we're going to throw away all the traditional blueprint game plan. We're going to go non traditional here because you have to be asymmetrical in your warfare. You have to kind of think scrappy because you're much smaller than the other players in the marketplace. First of all, I think you have to identify what your true strengths are. And you also have to identify what your constraints and your weaknesses are. And so we've used this oftentimes when we know our entire company, back when I was doing creative work, like 18 people. And when we go against these multinational companies, one department is more than our entire company put together. So we will say in our communication, either on the phone or on our website, say something like, there is no B team. Everybody you speak to will be the people working on your project. What that does is it raises a red flag to say, like, there's the bait and switch principle that happens at the big agencies. What they do is they have their pitch team go in, win the new business, and because they're the best, they then hand it to the B or the C team. Whether or not that B or C team is good or not is irrelevant when I speak about it, because I want to throw shade on them. I want to say, like, the people that win the business aren't the ones who are going to be doing the work. In our case, everybody that's working on the project is the people that are on the phone call right now. There is no B team. So you start to turn your weakness into your strength, right? You can say and if you only work in a local market where some of your clients have they're multinational corporation, like, we know more about this one area of land than what they know about anything else, right? Like, this is our lane. We understand this local market so well. So if you want to grow outside of this, we're not your agency. But if you want to deliberately approach this demographic and they're important to you, we understand this really well. So here you're hyper niching. It's not good enough to say we just serve this kind of community, but we serve this kind of community in this kind of place, this age, with this mindset and this attitude. So you turn all of your vulnerabilities, your weaknesses into your strengths. It's the 8 Mile rule from Eminem, right? So when the scene, the climax of the film with Eminem as B Rabbit in the character in 8 Mile, he's getting torn apart. He needs to win this MC battle, and his life is in shambles. And so when he's battling the other guy, he says, my mom's white trash. We live in a trailer. My girl just cheated on me. Yeah, so what? I'm white. What else you got? And then it took away all the ammunition from the other guy, because anything he says at this point is going to sound cliche. And with that, he wins the battle. So it's referred to as the 8 Mile rule. So when you look at your weaknesses and how your competitors can attack you, especially if you're a smaller agency, you need to embrace those weaknesses as a pillar of strength, and you go at it and you go hard. The other thing that you can do is you can start to create content where you demonstrate your expertise. This is really important. Instead of talking about the work that you just finished, talk about the stuff that no one understands, no one knows. Like, how did we create this campaign? How did we get our clients this result? What was the point of friction and the breakthrough and the clarity that you got? When you start to address that, other clients will start to question the agencies that they're working with and why they aren't having those conversations with them. Again, you're exposing things that no one talks about, and in doing so, you establish that you have the solution for it, while simultaneously saying, if your agency isn't doing this, maybe you need to reconsider. So what I would do is put a little call to action at the end of it by saying, If you'd like to get our 7-point plan on how to build effective marketing campaigns, please comment this word, some key phrase. And by doing so, you stop chasing them and they start to volunteer. You go from cold leads and cold outreach to warm leads and warm outreach. Because basically, anybody who touches that piece of content, who leaves a comment, especially if they say the magic word, which is like, teach me or something, then you know that they want to be reached out to. They've given you permission to follow up with them. You can have appointment setters reach out, and you can do a little bit of content creation, content marketing, and a little bit of warm outbound or outreach. The combination of two probably will be enough for you to generate enough leads for you to fill your pipeline.
Makes sense. Love it, man. Anything else I didn't ask you? Anything else you'd like to add?
I'm sure you have a lot more questions, but I'm almost out of time here.
Yeah, me
So
too.
perhaps you process the questions or the answers, and then maybe we can have another conversation some other time.
Sounds good. Good to meet you, man. Thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure.
And we'll chat soon.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you.